today is the last formal lesson on factoring. And then what we need to be able to do is we need to be able to take our factoring and do something else. So it's just not the matter of fact of factoring. We have to be able to do something after we factored. So that's why factoring is so important. So today is the last lesson, as I said, on factoring, and we've left, obviously, the hardest to the last. Okay, so we've gone through all the other steps and we're left with something that's quite complex. And what we mean by complex, it means that when we're looking at ax squared plus bx plus c, that our a this time is not going to be a positive 1. Okay, so first of all, when we take a look at these two questions, and here it's already in a factored form. So if I expand it, what does this look like when I expand it? Well, let's take a look at it and do it. So we end up with doing FOIL. So we end up with 2x times 3x. We end up with a 6x squared. And sorry, because my mouse writing skills are not the greatest. A 2x times a negative 2. So we're looking at a negative 4x. Then if we do the inside, we end up with a 15x. And finally, we're left with a negative 10. Okay, we can see our middle two terms are common, so that means we can put them together. So we're left with a 6x squared plus 11x, and finally a minus 10. Now, if I look at the question on the right, and it's expanding, almost identical, except this time what we have is a plus 2. So when we do this one, we end up having a 6x squared, a positive 4x, the inside ones now, so we're left with a positive 15x, and finally a plus 10. Again, our middle two terms go together, but this time, because they're both positive, I end up with a 19x plus a 10. Okay, so now remember, when we're factoring, we're starting with these answers and we're trying to get back to the before it's been expanded. And you're saying, oh, that looks like way too much work. Well, it is, but at the same time, there are different ways that we can do to help us make it a little bit easier. Okay, so let's just take a look at some information, and then I'll show you what I do when I'm actually doing this. So complex trinomial is the result of multiplying brackets that have something other than a equals 1 as the coefficient in one or both brackets. As a result, the trinomial has something other than 1 for the a value. Okay, that's what they mean by complex trinomial. So we looked at this here, okay, on both of these. And the difference being, and you might want to pause this at the end of this page so you can get this copy down. When I'm doing something like this, I know that the negative, if signs are different, positive if the signs are the same. Okay, so this is negative. If you notice here, this is negative, this is positive. We look at our questions above. Okay, we also know that the product of the inside terms, and this also is the product of the inside terms. All right. Now, using that information, let's take a look at this one. We know that this is the product of the first two numbers, okay, the 2x and the 3x. So that's what that number comes from. The 10, I know, is the product of the last numbers, in this case 5 and the 2. Right? And that middle number is the sum of the outside and inside products if the signs are the same, or it's the difference of outside and inside products if we have the signs are different. And you're still probably quite confused, and don't worry about it, because when we do a lot of examples on the next page, it'll be a little bit easier for you. So the process of factoring complex trinomials is, for the most part, guess and check. However, okay, so that doesn't mean to say you give up. It means that with a few tips, it actually becomes an educated guess and check. So we're doing an educated guess and check. Okay, so let's take a look at some examples. You can go back and you can actually copy this down if you to help you when you go back, if that makes sense to you. Okay, so let's look at the first questions. Okay, so here's the first question we're going to do. Now remember before when we did a equals 1, what we did is we read from backwards. We are going to do that as well. However, we have two things we have to consider for multiplying. We have the 6, so we have to have something that multiplies to 6. Okay, and then if I read backwards, it has to multiply to give me 4. I also know that it has to add to give me positive 11, and both brackets are positive. All right, so a few different things to work on here. So multiply to give me 6. Well, again, there's lots of different numbers that multiply to give me 6. So I'm going to choose what I think is the most common multiplication factor of 6, which is, in my opinion, 2 and 3. Okay? Now, what's the most common multiplication factor of 4? I'm not sure. I'm going to say 2 and 2. So what we do with these numbers then is we actually multiply them. So when I go 3 times 2, I end up with 6. 2 times 2 is 4. However, when I add these two numbers together, what happens is I'm going to get a 10 and I wanted 11. So that means that doesn't work for my question. All right, so it means that this combination is not going to give it to me. Now I'm going to keep again my 3 and 2 the same, and this time I'm going to change my multiplication of 4. While 2 and 2, the next common multiplication fact is obviously 1 and a 4. Okay, 1 times 4. So 3 times 1 is 3. 2 times 4 is 8. When I add those two numbers together, because I need to add, I end up with the number 11. And guess what? That's the one I want. So now how do I put this combination, because this is the combination I want, how do I put it into the brackets for this? So the first thing I do is in my first position of my bracket, to get that 6, I have to put the number 3 and 2. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. So I'm going to put my 3x and my 2x. My 3 must multiply with the number 1. So in order for it to multiply with the number 1, if I put it here, 3 will not multiply by 1. So it means that it would have to go in this location. And that means my 4 has to be here. Now because it's add to give me 11, both brackets are going to have the same sign and they're both going to be positive. All right, so you can see it's a little bit more work than what we've been doing. Okay, but we're going to do some more questions. Okay, the more we do, the better it becomes. All right, here's the next example. Okay, same kind of process. So I need a number, two numbers that multiply to give me 4. I also need two numbers that multiply to give me 27. They need to add to give me 21. All right. So again, it's a matter of choosing the most common, I always think, the most common multiplication facts for these numbers. So we had pretty good luck with 1 and 4, so I'm going to try that one again. So I'm going to choose 1 and I'm going to choose 4. The most common multiplication fact for 27 is, in my opinion, 9 times 3. Now, do I put the 9 here or do I put the 9 here? Well, if I don't get it right the first time, I can just redo it again. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do 1 times 9. When I do that, I end up with 9. 4 times 3 is 12. And then when I add those two numbers, because it says I'm supposed to add, I do get 11, and that's the number I want. So that means I've done it, I get 21, which is the number I want. So these are the numbers that I'm going to use. Okay, and I'll show you what happens if I don't guess. I can just change these around and I can put 1 times 3 and then 9 times 4. But I knew 9 times 4 was a 36, so I knew that was going to be too large. So I did kind of figure out in a sense in my head beforehand whether I wanted it to say 3 here and then 9. All right, so I know that in my two brackets I have my x and my 4x. the 1 has to multiply with the 9. So that means that it's going to have to go in the next bracket. And that means the 3 goes here. Because I'm adding, both have to have the same sign, so this is positive 21, so they both have to be plus.